"Get me someone educated!" the billionaire screamed, throwing a $50,000 bottle of wine against the wall. His entourage froze. The entire restaurant went silent. But then, a waitress, a woman everyone had ignored all night, a woman wiping a table with a dirty rag, stepped forward. She didn't flinch. She picked up a piece of broken glass, looked the billionaire dead in the eye, and whispered 4 words that would cost him his entire empire if he didn't listen. What happened next wasn't just a scene. It was a war. And you won't believe who she really was. The crash of crystal on marble sounded like a gunshot. In the ultra-exclusive VIP section of Le Monde, a restaurant in Manhattan, where a simple salad cost more than a Honda Civic, silence didn't just fall, it suffocated. Arthur Sterling, a man whose net worth hovered around the GDP of a small European nation, stood trembling with rage. His face, usually plastered on the covers of Forbes and Fortune as the stoic face of Sterling Heavy Industries, was a mask of crimson fury. "I said," Arthur hissed, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register, "explain the variance in the liquidity pool. Explain to me why the mesmerizing synergy merger you 3 have been pushing down my throat for 6 months has a $400 million hole in the operational expenses." Sitting across from him were 3 men in suits that cost more than most people's college tuitions. They were his dream team. Top analysts from Goldman, legal sharks from Harvard. And right now, they looked like schoolboys caught smoking behind the gym. "Mr. Sterling," the lead advisor, a slick man named Bradlington, stammered. It's a standard amortization schedule. The complex nature of the—" "Standard?" Arthur roared, grabbing the nearest object, a bottle of 1982 Chateau Margaux, and hurling it at the wall. Smash! Red wine bled down the pristine cream wallpaper like a crime scene. "Don't give me jargon," Arthur bellowed, his chest heaving. "I built this company from a garage in Detroit. I know when I'm being hustled. You're telling me we're buying this tech startup for $3 billion, but the books show they haven't made a profit since the invention of the iPhone. Get me someone educated. Get me someone who can actually read a balance sheet without trying to sell me a bridge in Brooklyn." The restaurant manager was already rushing over, wringing his hands, terrified of losing his biggest whale. The other diners, CIOs, politicians, and socialites, pretended to look at their food, but their ears were tuned to the frequency of disaster. Arthur slumped back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He felt old. He was 62, a widower, and surrounded by sharks. He knew something was wrong with this deal. His gut, the same gut that told him to buy into lithium batteries 10 years ago, was screaming no. But the numbers, his advisors kept massaging the numbers until they looked perfect. He felt isolated. "Is there no one?" Arthur whispered to the room, a desperate plea. "Is there no one in this city who isn't a yes man?" That was when the waitress walked up. She wasn't the manager. She wasn't the sommelier. She was a runner, the lowest of the low in the restaurant hierarchy. She was the one who cleared the plates and filled the water glasses. She looked to be in her late 30s, though her eyes held the weariness of someone who had lived 3 lifetimes. Her name tag, crooked and cheap plastic, read Sarah. Her brown hair was pulled back in a messy, practical bun, and her uniform was a size too big, hiding her figure. She walked right through the puddle of spilled wine, her cheap rubber-soled shoes crunching on the glass. The manager, a frantic little man named Henri, intercepted her. "Sarah, get back to the kitchen. I'll call the cleaning crew. Do not disturb Mr. Sterling." Sarah ignored him. She didn't look at Henry. She didn't look at the advisors. She walked straight to the table, placed a fresh napkin down in front of Arthur Sterling, and began to pick up the larger shards of glass with her bare hands. "Leave it," Arthur snapped, not looking up. "Go away." Sarah didn't move. She held a shard of green glass between her thumb and forefinger. She looked at the spreadsheet spread out on the table, the document Bradlington had been using to justify the merger. "It's not amortization," she said. Her voice was quiet, raspy, like she hadn't used it much lately, but it carried a strange weight. Arthur looked up. The advisors scoffed. "Excuse me?" Bradlington sneered. "Honey, the adults are talking. Go get a mop." Sarah didn't even blink at the insult. She kept her eyes locked on Arthur. "It's not amortization," she repeated. She reached out a finger, calloused, with a short, unpolished nail, and tapped a specific line on the complex financial document. Row 44, column C. It's a circular reference disguised as a tax shield. They're moving the same debt between 3 shell companies to make it look like revenue. It's the same trick Enron used in '01, just slower. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of shock. Bradlington turned pale. You incompetent little... Who are you?" Arthur asked, his eyes narrowing. He looked at her properly for the first time. He saw the tired lines around her eyes, the chapped lips, the cheap uniform. But he also saw a terrifying intelligence burning behind her gaze. "I'm just the person clearing your table," Sarah said, dropping the glass shard onto a tray. "But if you sign that deal, Mr. Sterling, you won't just lose $400 million. You'll trigger a covenant breach with your primary lender in Zurich. They'll call in your loans by Monday morning. You'll be bankrupt by Wednesday." She turned to walk away. "Wait!" Arthur commanded. He stood up. "How do you know about the Zurich covenants? That's private information. That's top secret clearance." Sarah paused. She didn't turn back. "Everyone talks in this town, Arthur. Even when the help is standing right there pouring the water." "Sit down," Arthur said. It wasn't a request. "I have tables to bus," Sarah said. "I said sit down," Arthur roared, then softened his tone. "Please, sit. Henri, get her a chair and a glass of wine, not the cheap stuff. Open the 96 Screaming Eagle." Henry, the manager, looked like he was having a stroke. "Mr. Sterling, she is a waitress. She is the only person in this room who just made sense," Arthur said. He glared at Bradlington. "Get up. You're in her seat." Bradlington, red-faced and humiliated, scrambled out of the booth. Sarah hesitated. She looked at the door. For a second, she looked like a deer ready to bolt. The fight-or-flight response was triggering hard. But then she looked at Arthur, a man being eaten alive by wolves. She sighed, a long, weary exhalation, and sat down. "Talk," Arthur said, pushing the spreadsheet toward her. Sarah picked up a pen. The way she held it wasn't how a waitress holds a pen to take an order. She held it like a weapon, like a conductor's baton. "You're looking at the EBITDA," she said, circling a group of numbers rapidly. "But you need to look at the off-balance sheet liabilities. Here, and here." She slashed lines through the projected earnings. "These aren't projections. These are fantasies. This company you're buying, it's a ghost ship. It's empty." Arthur watched her work. He wasn't looking at the numbers anymore. He was watching her, the way her mind moved, the speed, the aggression. "Where did you learn this?" Arthur asked quietly. "You're not a waitress." "Who are you?" Sarah froze. The pen hovered over the paper. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a deep, ancient pain. "I'm nobody," she said softly. "Just Sarah." "Nobody learns forensic accounting at a diner," Arthur countered. "I know talent, and I know fear. You're hiding, Sarah. Who are you hiding from?" Before she could answer, a man approached the table. He was tall, wearing a tuxedo that fit too perfectly. He had the cold, dead eyes of a shark. This was Julian Thorne, Arthur's future son-in-law and the man orchestrating the merger. "Arthur?" Julian smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He looked at Sarah with pure disgust. "Why is the help sitting at the table? Is she bothering you?" Sarah stiffened. Her hand gripped the pen so hard her knuckles turned white. She knew Julian, but Julian, in his arrogance, didn't recognize her. Not yet. "She's saving me from making a mistake," Arthur grunted. "She says the numbers are cooked." Julian laughed. A cold, dry sound. "Arthur, really? You're going to take financial advice from a woman who cleans up vomit for a living? Bradlington is a Wharton graduate. This woman probably didn't finish high school." He leaned down, bringing his face close to Sarah's. "Run along, darling. Go get the dessert menu. The grown-ups have business." Sarah slowly raised her head. She looked Julian directly in the eyes. "The variance isn't an accident, Julian," she said clearly, "and neither was the fire at the warehouse in 22. Julian's face went slack. The color drained from his skin so fast he looked like a corpse. Arthur looked between them. "What? What fire?" Sarah stood up. "I can't be here," she whispered. "I've said too much." She turned and ran. Not walked, ran. Through the dining room, past the stunned hostess, and out the service door into the rainy New York night. "Stop her!" Arthur yelled. But she was gone. Arthur turned back to Julian. His future son-in-law was trembling. "What did she mean, Julian?" Arthur asked, his voice deadly calm. "What fire?" Julian swallowed hard. "She's crazy, Arthur. Clearly mentally unstable. I'll handle this." "No," Arthur said. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A private investigator named Graves, a man who used to work for the CIA. "Graves," Arthur said into the phone, never taking his eyes off Julian. "I need you to find a woman, a waitress at Le Monde. Goes by Sarah. I don't care what it costs. Find her. Tonight." Sarah didn't stop running until her lungs burned, and the neon lights of Le Monde were a blur in the distance. She ducked into a subway station on 52nd Street, swiping her Metro card with shaking hands. She collapsed onto a bench on the platform, surrounded by the grime and noise of the city. She pulled her knees to her chest, rocking slightly. "Stupid," she berated herself. "Stupid, stupid, stupid. You were safe. You were invisible. Why did you open your mouth? For 3 years she had been a ghost. She had erased her digital footprint, cut ties with everyone she ever knew, and buried her past under layers of cheap uniforms and silence. She wasn't Sarah. Her real name was Katherine Vale. 5 years ago, Katherine Vale had been the youngest CFO in the history of Wall Street. She was a prodigy, a quant genius who could see patterns in market data that supercomputers missed. She had been on the cover of Time magazine. She was the golden girl of Sterling Industries' biggest rival, Apex Corp. And then she had been framed for the biggest embezzlement scheme of the decade. $300 million gone. Evidence planted on her laptop. Offshore accounts opened in her name. She had been facing 20 years in federal prison. She knew who did it. It was the same people trying to destroy Arthur Sterling now. A shadow syndicate known as The Circle, a group of corrupt executives who cannibalized companies from the inside. She had managed to flee the country hours before the FBI raided her penthouse. She spent 2 years in Southeast Asia, then Europe, before sneaking back into the US, desperate to clear her name. But she had no resources, no allies. So she became a waitress. The best place to hide is in plain sight, serving the very people who destroyed you, invisible to their arrogant eyes. She pulled a burner phone from her pocket. It was an old Nokia brick. She had one contact saved. Uncle Ben. Ben wasn't her uncle. He was Benjamin Benny Roth, a disgraced forensic accountant who ran a pawn shop in Queens. He was the only person who knew she was alive. She dialed. "Yeah?" a gruff voice answered. "They saw me," Katherine whispered. "Who?" "Arthur Sterling. And Julian." Silence on the other end. Then a curse. "Julian, the Viper? Kat, you gotta move. If Julian knows you're in New York, you're dead. He thinks you have the drive." "I do have the drive, Benny," she said, clutching her bag. Sewn into the lining of her battered purse was a micro SD card, the black box. It contained the unencrypted ledgers of Apex Corp, proving her innocence and proving Julian's guilt. But it was encrypted with a biometric key she couldn't crack without a specific mainframe access, Arthur Sterling's mainframe. That's why she was at Le Monde. She had been trying to get close to Arthur for months, hoping to slip the drive into his pocket or find a way to warn him. But tonight she had lost control. "Kat, listen to me," Benny said. "Go to the safe house in the Bronx. Do not go back to your apartment. They'll be there." "I can't run any more, Benny," she said, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "Arthur is going to sign that deal. If he does, the Circle wins. They'll gut his company and use the capital to wash the money they stole from Apex. I have to stop them." "You stop them, you die," Benny said flatly. "If I don't stop them, I'm already dead," she replied. She hung up. She stood up as the subway train screeched into the station. She wasn't going to the Bronx. She was going to the one place they wouldn't expect her to go. She was going to Arthur Sterling's house. Meanwhile, back at Le Monde, the atmosphere was toxic. Arthur had dismissed his advisors. He sat alone in the booth, staring at the numbers. Sarah, no, this mystery woman, had circled. He pulled up the name Julian Thorne on his iPad. Julian was the golden boy, engaged to Arthur's daughter, Emily. Emily, who was sweet, naive, and completely in love with the shark. Arthur loved his daughter more than his empire. If Julian was a traitor... His phone buzzed. It was Graves. "Mr. Sterling." The PI's voice was gravelly. "I ran the Waitress. Sarah Jenkins. Social Security number belongs to a woman who died in 1998 in Ohio. She's a ghost." "I knew it," Arthur muttered. "What else?" "I pulled the security footage from the restaurant," Graves continued. "I ran facial recognition. It took a while because she's changed her hair, lost weight, no makeup. But the bone structure matches." "Matches who?" "Mr. Sterling. Do you remember the Apex Corp scandal 5 years ago? The CFO who vanished with 300 million? Arthur's blood went cold. "Katherine Vale." "Bingo," Graves said. "You just had dinner with the most wanted woman in corporate America." Arthur dropped the phone. Katherine Vale. The enemy. Apex was his biggest rival. When she went down, he had cheered. He assumed she was just another greedy executive. But what if she wasn't? What she said about the numbers tonight was true. He had checked it himself in the last hour. She was right. The deal was a trap. If Katherine Vale, a woman with every reason to hate him, was trying to save him, that meant the real enemy was someone much closer. Arthur stood up. He threw a stack of hundreds on the table. "Graves," he said, picking up the phone. "Bring the car around. We're going hunting." "Where to, boss?" "My penthouse," Arthur said. "Because if I know Katherine Vale's reputation, that's exactly where she's heading." The elevator to the penthouse of the Sterling Tower didn't have buttons. It scanned a keycard and the retina of the passenger. It was a fortress in the sky, designed to keep the world out. Arthur Sterling stood in the rising cabin, the digital floor numbers ticking upward. 80. 90. 100. The silence was heavy. Beside him, Graves, the private investigator, checked the safety on his Glock 19. "If she's in there," Graves muttered, "she's dangerous. You don't embezzle 300 million without knowing how to handle yourself. She might be armed." "She's an accountant, Graves, not a hitman," Arthur grunted, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. He remembered the look in Katherine's, eyes at the restaurant. It wasn't the look of a criminal. It was the look of a soldier who had lost her platoon. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. The penthouse was vast, a palace of glass and steel overlooking the rain-swept Manhattan skyline. It was dark, the only light coming from the city below. "Stay back," Graves whispered, stepping out first, gun drawn. He swept the room. Living room clear. Kitchen clear. "Mr. Sterling," a voice called out from the shadows of the library. Arthur froze. It was her. "Hold your fire, Graves," Arthur commanded. He walked toward the library. The room was lined with rare books and smelled of old leather. Sitting in Arthur's favorite armchair, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling window, was Katherine Vale. She had ditched the Waitress uniform. She was wearing an oversized hoodie she must have stolen from his gym bag in the mudroom. She looked small, fragile, but her posture was rigid. On the desk in front of her was a laptop. His laptop. "You have 30 seconds, Arthur said, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and curiosity. 30 seconds before Graves puts a bullet in your leg and we drag you to the FBI. Katherine didn't flinch. She turned the laptop screen toward him. "I didn't steal the money from Apex, Arthur," she said, her voice steady. "And I didn't break into your house to rob you. I broke in because this is the only computer in the city powerful enough to decrypt the black box." She placed a small, silver micro SD card on the mahogany desk. It looked harmless. "What is that?" Arthur asked. "Insurance," Katherine said. 5 years ago, I found a discrepancy in the Apex ledgers. Tiny transfers, cents mostly. But they were happening millions of times a day. It was an algorithm designed to bleed the company dry without triggering an audit. I traced the code. I thought it was a glitch. She stood up slowly, keeping her hands where Graves could see them. It wasn't a glitch. It was a weapon. A financial virus created by a group called The Circle. They target blue-chip companies, install a puppet executive, bleed the liquidity, and then short the stock when the company crashes. They made $3 billion off the collapse of Apex, and they framed me to cover their tracks. Arthur stepped closer. "And what does this have to do with me?" "Look at the screen, Arthur." Arthur looked. It was a wire transfer schematic, a complex web of shell companies, but the destination of the funds was clear. "This is the Synergy merger," Arthur whispered, reading the data. "The company Preston is making me buy." "It's not a company," Katherine said ruthlessly. "It's a debt dump. The moment you sign those papers tomorrow, Sterling Heavy Industries absorbs $4 billion in toxic debt disguised as assets. The Circle will short your stock at 9:08 a.m. By noon, you'll be insolvent. By dinner, they'll own your empire for pennies on the dollar." Arthur felt the room spin. Preston is my future son-in-law. He loves my daughter. He's been with us for years." Katherine looked at him with profound pity. "Preston is a sleeper. The Circle plants them years in advance. They go to the right schools, join the right clubs, marry the right women. He doesn't love Emily, Arthur. She's just his cover story." "Liar!" Arthur roared. He lunged forward, grabbing Katherine by the shoulders. Graves stepped forward, alarmed, but Arthur waved him off. "He's family! Check the timestamp on the file," Katherine yelled back, not backing down. "Check it." Arthur looked at the screen. The document, a memo authorizing the debt transfer, was dated 3 days ago. It was digitally signed, authorized by Preston J. Caldwell. Arthur stared at the signature. It was unmistakable. The man he treated like a son. The man who was going to marry his little girl in 2 months. Arthur collapsed into the chair opposite her. The fight drained out of him. He looked 10 years older than he had 10 minutes ago. "Why?" Arthur whispered. "Why come to me? I'm your enemy. I cheered when you went to prison." "Because I'm tired of running," Katherine said, her voice breaking for the first time. "And because I know what it's like to lose everything because you trusted the wrong person. I couldn't watch them do it to you too." Arthur looked at this woman, this waitress, and saw the steel backbone she had hidden under that uniform. "What do we do?" Arthur asked. Katherine leaned forward. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. "We don't just stop the deal, Arthur. We kill the circle. But to do that, I need access to the Sterling mainframe. I need to upload the virus back to them through the transaction tunnel. I need to fry their servers before they can disconnect." "That's illegal," Graves noted dryly. "Highly illegal." "So is framing me for $300 million, Katherine shot back. Arthur looked at the laptop. Then he looked at Katherine. "Do it," Arthur said. "I can't," Katherine said. "The mainframe is biometrically locked, voice recognition. It requires 2 authorizations, yours and the CFO's." Arthur cursed. "My CFO is Bradlington, the idiot from the restaurant. He's probably in on it." "Exactly," Katherine said. "Which means we can't use the mainframe here. We have to go to the physical server farm. In New Jersey." "Tonight?" "Now," Katherine said. "The market opens in 6 hours." Just then, Arthur's phone rang. The ringtone shattered the tension. Arthur looked at the screen. It was Emily, his daughter. He picked it up, his hand shaking. "Emily, sweetheart, it's late. Is everything okay?" "Daddy?" Emily's voice was small, terrified. She was crying. Arthur's blood ran cold. "Emily, what's wrong?" I don't know," she sobbed. "Preston came over. He's acting strange. He's tearing the apartment apart, looking for something. He's screaming about a waitress. Daddy, I'm scared." In the background, Arthur heard a crash, and then Preston's voice, manic and unrecognizable. "Where is the backup drive, Emily? Arthur must have given it to you. Tell me." "Preston," Arthur shouted into the phone. "Don't you touch her." There was a scuffle on the other end. Then the phone changed hands. The breathing on the line was heavy, calm, and terrifying. "Hello, Arthur," Preston said. His voice had lost all the charm, all the deference. It was the voice of a stranger. "If you touch a hair on her head," Arthur growled, "I will kill you with my bare hands." "Save the tough guy act," Preston said smoothly. "I know Katherine Vale is with you. I know she has the black box. Here is the deal. You bring me the drive. Tonight. Or Emily has a tragic accident." "Preston, listen to me. You have 1 hour, Arthur. Meet me at the Sterling shipyards. Warehouse 4. Come alone. If I see cops, if I see Graves, she dies." The line went dead. Arthur stood there, the phone slipping from his numb fingers. Katherine was already moving. She grabbed the micro SD card and shoved it into her pocket. "He's panicking," Katherine said, her mind racing. "He knows the merger is blown if I talk. He's trying to cut his losses and get the evidence." "I have to give him the drive," Arthur said, his face pale. "I have to save Emily." "If you give him the drive, he destroys the evidence and kills both of you," Katherine said sharply. "He can't leave witnesses, Arthur. Not now." Then what choice do I have? Arthur shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. Katherine walked over to him. She grabbed his lapels and pulled him down to her level. We fight, she said. Graves creates a diversion. You go in as the distraction. And I... She paused, looking at the rain-streaked window. I do what I do best. I break the system. You're an accountant, Arthur said, despair in his voice. What can you do at a shipyard? Katherine smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. Sterling Shipyards is fully automated, isn't it? Run by the same network as your company. Yes, Arthur said. So, Katherine said. I don't need a gun, Arthur. I just need a Wi-Fi connection. The rain was coming down in sheets now, turning the streets of New York into rivers of black oil. Arthur's Rolls-Royce Phantom tore down the West Side Highway, doing 90 miles an hour. Graves was driving with the precision of a stuntman. Arthur sat in the back, checking the load on a snub-nosed .38 revolver he hadn't fired since the 90s. Katherine sat next to him, typing furiously on the laptop, which was tethered to the car's satellite hotspot. I'm in the peripheral firewall, she muttered, her eyes darting across lines of code that scrolled like a waterfall. But Preston has locked the local grid at the shipyard. I can't access the cameras inside the warehouse. Can you override the cranes? Graves asked from the front seat. Working on it. The encryption is military grade. The Circle must have upgraded your security for you. Irony, Arthur muttered. They screeched to a halt at the gates of the Sterling shipyards. It was a massive industrial complex on the Hudson River. Shipping containers were stacked like skyscrapers, creating a maze of steel canyons. He's in Warehouse 4, Arthur said. Graves, you take the perimeter. Katherine, stay in the car. No, Katherine said. She slammed the laptop shut. I need to be within 50 feet of the local router to hack the automation. I'm coming with you. It's too dangerous, Arthur argued. My life ended 5 years ago, Arthur, Katherine said softly. This is the only way I get it back. Let's go. They moved into the shipyard under the cover of the storm. The wind howled through the metal containers, masking their footsteps. Warehouse 4 was a cavernous structure used for storing heavy machinery. The massive sliding doors were cracked open, spilling yellow light onto the wet asphalt. Arthur stepped into the light, holding his hands up. He left the gun tucked in his waistband at the back. Katherine melted into the shadows behind a stack of pallets, booting up her laptop. "Preston!" Arthur shouted, his voice echoing in the vast space. "I'm here!" From the catwalk high above, a spotlight clicked on, blinding Arthur. "I told you to come alone, Arthur." Preston's voice boomed from the darkness. "I am alone," Arthur lied. "Let her go!" High up on the metal gantry, Preston stepped into the light. He looked impeccable even now. His suit was crisp, his hair perfect, but his eyes were manic. He was holding Emily by the arm. She was gagged, her hands zip-tied. She looked down at her father, eyes wide with terror. They were 40 feet in the air, standing on a narrow metal walkway. "The drive!" Preston yelled. "Throw it up!" "Let her walk down first," Arthur bargained. "Do you think I'm stupid?" Preston laughed. "The moment she's safe, you call the police. Toss the drive, Arthur, or she takes a flying lesson." He pushed Emily toward the railing. She screamed against the gag. Hidden in the shadows below, Katherine's fingers flew across her keyboard. Target acquired. Overhead gantry crane. 7. Status, offline. Bypassing admin protocol. "Come on," Katherine whispered, sweat dripping down her forehead. "Come on, you piece of junk." Arthur reached into his pocket. He pulled out the silver SD card. "Here," he shouted. "It's everything. The ledgers, the emails, the proofs. It sends you to prison for life, Preston. But take it. Just give me my daughter." "Prison," Preston sneered. "Arthur, you naive old dinosaur. The Circle owns the judges. The circle owns the senators. I won't go to prison. I'll get a promotion for cleaning up this mess." "Authorize!" Katherine hissed, hitting the enter key. "Access granted." Suddenly, the massive overhead crane above Preston began to hum. The giant magnetic clamp used for lifting shipping containers swung silently through the dark rafters. Preston didn't hear it over the storm and his own shouting. "Throw it!" Preston commanded. Arthur threw the SD card. It spun through the air, glinting in the spotlight. Preston instinctively let go of Emily with one hand to catch it. He leaned over the railing, snatching the tiny card from the air. "Got it!" he triumphed. He held it up like a trophy. "Goodbye, Arthur. Say hello to your wife for me." He grabbed Emily again, preparing to shove her over the edge. "Now!" Katherine screamed from the shadows. She slammed a command into the laptop. Above Preston, the 2-ton electromagnetic clamp dropped like a stone. It stopped 5 feet above his head with a sickening thud of breaking hydraulics. Preston looked up, startled. "Activate magnet," Katherine whispered. "Bezuzzed." The electromagnet powered up to full capacity. Preston was wearing a custom Italian suit, but he was also wearing a gun in a shoulder holster, a steel watch, and he was standing on a steel grate. The magnetic force was immense. The gun was ripped from his holster, flying up and sticking to the magnet. His watch yanked his arm upward. But the real kicker was the metal railing he was leaning on. The magnet magnetized the entire gantry. Preston was slammed against the railing, pinned by the metal objects on his person. "Run, Emily!" Arthur screamed. Emily dropped to her knees, crawling away from the magnetized Preston, scrambling toward the stairs. "No!" Preston shrieked, struggling against the invisible force. He tried to pull himself free, but the magnet was holding him fast. Arthur drew his revolver and aimed up at the catwalk. "It's over, Preston!" But it wasn't. From the shadows of the warehouse floor, 3 men emerged. They were dressed in tactical gear, the Circle's cleanup crew. "Drop the gun, Sterling," the lead mercenary said, aiming an assault rifle at Arthur. Arthur froze. He was outgunned. Katherine watched from behind the pallets. She had used her ace. She had no weapons left. "Well done with the magnet," the mercenary leader said, his voice distorted by a mask. "But playtime is over. Kill the old man, retrieve the girl, and find the hacker." The mercenaries raised their rifles. Arthur closed his eyes, waiting for the end. Creak. A massive sound echoed through the warehouse. Everyone looked toward the bay doors. The doors weren't opening. They were bending. Something massive was ramming them from the outside. Boom! The metal buckled. Boom! The doors flew off their hinges, crashing onto the concrete floor with the force of an earthquake. Standing in the rain, illuminated by the lightning, was a machine. A towering, yellow piece of construction equipment. A Sterling Heavy Industries mining loader. The tires were twice the size of a man, and driving it, looking like a demon from hell, was a short, bald man in a Hawaiian shirt. It was Benny, the pawn shop owner. "Did someone order a pizza?" Benny screamed over the roar of the engine. He slammed the loader into gear and charged the mercenaries. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Benny roared with laughter as he swung the massive hydraulic arm of the loader. The steel bucket, large enough to hold a sedan, swept through the air like a fly swatter. It clipped a stack of empty shipping pallets, sending wood splinters exploding like shrapnel. The mercenaries scrambled, their tactical formation shattered. One of them opened fire on the loader, sparks flying as bullets pinged harmlessly off the thick, yellow industrial steel. "Get behind me, Arthur!" Benny screamed over the engine noise. He dropped the bucket to the floor with a ground-shaking clang, creating a makeshift steel wall between Arthur and the gunman. Arthur didn't hesitate. He grabbed the back of Katherine's hoodie. "Go! The server room is in the back office, past the assembly line. It's the only hard-line connection that won't be jammed." "What about Emily?" Katherine yelled, looking up at the catwalk. "I'll get her," Arthur shouted. "Do your job, Katherine. Kill the company. Save the world." Katherine nodded once, her face grim. She bolted from behind the loader, sprinting low through the maze of machinery. A bullet whizzed past her ear, shattering a pressure gauge on a pipe next to her, spraying steam. She didn't stop. She ran with the desperation of a woman who had spent 5 years waiting for this exact moment. High above, Preston was fighting for his life against physics. The electromagnet was still humming, pinning his gun, his watch, and the metal buckles of his shoes to the gantry floor. He was trapped like a fly on fly paper. But Preston was driven by a feral panic. He shimmied out of his Italian suit jacket, leaving the gun trapped against the railing. He kicked off his expensive loafers, leaving them stuck to the grate. In his socks and shirt sleeves, he scrambled free of the magnetic field. "Emily!" he screamed, his voice cracking. Emily had made it to the stairs, but her hands were still zip-tied behind her back. She stumbled, falling hard on the metal steps. Preston lunged for her, grabbing her by the hair. "You think your daddy can save you? He's dead! They're all dead!" "Hey, Preston!" Preston froze. He looked down the stairs. Arthur Sterling was climbing up towards them. He was 62 years old. He was out of breath. He was soaking wet. But his eyes were burning with a cold, blue fire that Preston had never seen in the boardroom. "Let her go," Arthur said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Get back, old man," Preston shrieked. He reached into his sock and pulled out a small ceramic knife, non-magnetic. He pressed the blade against Emily's throat. "I'll cut her! I swear to God, I'll cut her!" Arthur stopped. He was 10 steps below them. "You lose, Preston," Arthur said. "Look around. Your hit squad is pinned down by a lunatic in a bulldozer. The police are 5 minutes away, and Katherine Vale is currently uploading the entire history of your little circle to the SEC. "She can't!" Preston yelled, sweat pouring down his face. "The encryption is unbreakable." "She wrote the code, you idiot," Arthur spat. "She's not hacking in, she's logging on." The distraction worked. Preston's eyes darted toward the office window, where he could see Katherine's silhouette frantically typing. In that split second, Emily dropped her weight. She slammed her head backward into Preston's nose. There was a sickening crunch of cartilage. Preston howled in pain, blinding tears filling his eyes. He stumbled back. Arthur didn't run up the stairs. He lunged. He tackled Preston around the waist, driving him backward. They crashed onto the metal landing. It was a brawl. No technique, just desperation. Preston was younger and faster, but Arthur was fighting for his child. Preston slashed with the knife, cutting a deep gash in Arthur's forearm. Arthur didn't even flinch. He slammed a fist into Preston's jaw, then another. "That's for the merger," Arthur grunted, landing a heavy blow to the gut. "And that's for the wine." Preston scrambled backward, coughing blood. He looked over the edge of the railing. It was a 40-foot drop to the concrete below. "Arthur, wait!" Preston pleaded, holding up his hands. "Wait! I can give you names. I can give you the senators. Don't let me fall." Arthur stood over him, clutching his bleeding arm. He looked at the man who had pretended to love his daughter. "I don't need your names," Arthur said coldly. "I have an accountant." Suddenly, the warehouse lights flickered and died. Total darkness. Then, a moment later, every light in the facility blasted on at full brightness. The siren on the roof began to wail. Inside the office, Katherine hit enter. The automated systems of the warehouse roared to life. The assembly line belt started moving. The robotic welding arms began to dance, and the massive bay doors began to close, sealing the mercenaries inside with Benny and his loader. "It's done," Arthur whispered. Preston saw the look on Arthur's face. He knew it was over. With a scream of rage, he tried to rush Arthur, aiming to push him off the ledge. But Arthur sidestepped. He was a businessman. He knew how to pivot. Preston's momentum carried him forward. He hit the railing hard, flipped over the top, and flailed in the air. He didn't hit the floor. As he fell, the automated crane, reprogrammed by Katherine, swung its massive claw. The jaws clamped shut around Preston's midsection, catching him in midair. He dangled there, suspended 20 feet above the ground, screaming as the robot arms swung him gently back and forth like a pendulum. Arthur rushed to Emily, using Preston's dropped knife to slice her zip ties. They collapsed into each other's arms, sobbing on the metal grate. Down below, the mercenaries realized the tide had turned. Sirens were wailing closer now. Blue and red lights flashed through the cracks in the buckled bay doors. Benny killed the engine of the loader. He climbed out, lit a cigar, and surveyed the carnage. "Well," Benny yelled up to Arthur, "I think that invalidates the warranty on the loader, boss." The sun rose over Manhattan, oblivious to the violence of the night before. It was a crisp, golden morning. The city was waking up. Coffee machines were gurgling, and the stock market was preparing to open. At 7:45 a.m., the boardroom of Sterling Heavy Industries was a picture of corporate elegance. Bradlington, the treacherous CFO, sat at the head of the table. Flanking him were 3 lawyers from a firm known for burying bodies, metaphorically, and 2 representatives from the Synergy Group, the circle's front men. They were checking their watches. "He's not coming," Bradlington said, smoothing his silk tie. A smug smile played on his lips. "I told you." Preston handled it. "The old man is probably floating in the Hudson by now." "What about the signature?" one of the lawyers asked. "We need Sterling's signature to finalize the debt transfer." "We have power of attorney in the event of his incapacitation," Bradlington said, sliding a document forward. "I can sign for him." He uncapped a fountain pen. The nib hovered over the paper. The deal that would destroy a 60-year-old American legacy was seconds away from completion. The double doors of the boardroom burst open. They didn't just open. They slammed against the mahogany walls with a violence that made the lawyers jump. Arthur Sterling walked in. He looked like he had been run over by a truck. His arm was in a sling. He had a bandage over his left eye. His suit was torn, stained with grease and dried blood. He was limping, but he was shaving. He walked to the head of the table. Bradlington froze, the pen slipping from his fingers. "Arthur," Bradlington stammered. "My God, look at you. We heard there was an accident. We were just—" "Shut up, Bradlington," Arthur growled. He didn't sit. He stood, looming over them. Behind Arthur, a woman entered. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She was wearing one of Emily's power suits, a sharp, navy blue tailored blazer and trousers. Her hair was down, brushed and fierce. She carried a laptop under one arm. The room went deadly silent. "Gentlemen," Arthur said, his voice raspy, "I believe you haven't met my new chief financial officer." Bradlington turned pale. That's Katherine Vale," the woman said. She walked to the end of the table and plugged her laptop into the projector system. "And I have a presentation for you." "Security," Bradlington shrieked, standing up. "Get security in here. This woman is a fugitive." "Sit down, Brad," Arthur roared. It was the voice that had built skyscrapers. Bradlington sat. Katherine tapped a key. The massive screen behind her lit up. It wasn't a PowerPoint. It was a live feed of a bank account in the Cayman Islands. "This," Katherine said, her voice cool and professional, "is the Synergy liquidity pool. As you can see, as of 8 a.m. this morning, it is empty." The lawyers gasped. "Where is the money?" the Circle representative demanded. "That account held $4 billion. "I moved it," Katherine said simply. You stole it?" Bradlington accused. "No," Katherine smiled. "I reallocated it. You see, when I accessed the server farm last night, I found the routing numbers for every shell company the Circle uses. I set up a recursive algorithm. Every penny you tried to funnel into the Sterling merger was automatically bounced to a holding account controlled by the United States Department of Justice, flagged as evidence of racketeering. She clicked the next slide. It was a list of names, hundreds of them. Politicians, judges, bankers, CEOs. This is the membership list of the Circle, Katherine continued. I just emailed it to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the FBI Cybercrimes Division. Bradlington was shaking. You can't prove any of this. I don't have to, Katherine said. She looked at the TV screen mounted on the wall. Turn it on. Arthur picked up the remote and clicked the power button. The news was already on. The headline on CNBC was flashing in red. Breaking news. Massive corruption scandal exposed. Sterling whistleblower reveals the Circle. The reporter was standing outside the Sterling shipyards. Behind her, police were leading a handcuffed Preston Caldwell into a squad car. We are receiving reports, the reporter said, breathless, that a massive data dump has incriminated dozens of high-profile figures in a scheme to defraud American companies. The evidence was reportedly provided by Katherine Vale, the former Apex CFO who has been missing for 5 years. The Department of Justice has already issued arrest warrants. In the boardroom, the lawyers were already packing their briefcases, trying to flee the sinking ship. Bradlington sat slumped in his chair, defeated. Arthur walked over to him. He leaned down close. "You're fired, Bradlington," Arthur whispered, "and since you signed off on the last quarterly audit, you're going to prison for fraud. Katherine found the discrepancies you hid in row 44. Bradlington put his head in his hands and wept. Arthur turned to the rest of the room. "Get out, all of you. Before I have security, throw you out the window." The room cleared in 10 seconds. Arthur and Katherine were left alone in the silence. The view of the city behind them was breathtaking. Arthur walked over to the window. He touched his bandaged arm. "We did it," he said, sounding surprised. "We did," Katherine agreed. She closed her laptop. She looked tired. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted. "So," Arthur turned to her. "What now? The FBI will want to talk to you. You're still technically a fugitive." "I have the proof to clear my name now," Katherine said. "It'll take time, lawyers, court dates." "I have good lawyers," Arthur said. "The best. They're yours." Katherine smiled, a genuine soft smile. "Thank you, Arthur." "No," Arthur said. "Thank you. You saved my company. You saved my daughter." He paused. "The job is yours, you know. CFO, real salary this time. No tips." Katherine laughed. It was a rusty sound. "I don't know. I kind of liked the diner. Less stress." "I'll double your offer," Arthur said. "I'll think about it," Katherine said. "But first, I need something from you." "Anything," Arthur said. "Name it. A bonus? A car? A house?" Katherine shook her head. She looked down at her hands, the hands that had bussed tables for 3 years, the hands that had just taken down a global conspiracy. "I need you to call Le Monde," she said. "The restaurant?" Arthur asked, confused. "Why?" Katherine's eyes twinkled. "I walked out in the middle of a shift," she said. "I need you to call Henri and tell him I quit. I don't want a bad reference." Arthur Sterling, the billionaire industrialist, threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, booming laugh that chased away the shadows of the night. "Done," Arthur said. "And Katherine?" "Yes? Let's get some breakfast. Somewhere cheap. I'm craving pancakes." And that is how a billionaire and a waitress took down the most dangerous criminal organization in the world. Katherine Vale was eventually fully exonerated. She didn't take the CFO job immediately. She took a year off to travel the world, on Arthur's dime, of course. But eventually, she returned to New York. Today, she runs Sterling Industries, alongside Arthur and Emily. As for the "get me someone educated" demand, Arthur Sterling never said it again. He learned the hard way that the smartest person in the room isn't always the one in the suit. Sometimes, it's the one pouring the water. If you enjoyed this story of justice and revenge, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if you found $4 billion in a secret account? See you in the next video.